Welcome anybody who is listening and watching this as a recording. I'm going to try to figure out how to turn the AI off. I don't like what it does with creating all these little choppy things for me. So no more of those. You're going to either see a section that I put up on YouTube from this whole thing, which I will allow Substack to send out, or nothing at all, because I'm trying to learn to use the technologies a little bit. I invited people to come today. I said I was going to be in my PJs and I was going to share happy birth stories. This moment in time is so ugly. Uh, it's beyond words for me on the ugliness. So I just had to think into, I'm going to try to still the camera a little bit. What would I need or want as a woman of childbearing age right now? I would want reassurance that you could do it. That is, birth the babies. Where I am in Vermont, we have growing fear as the little hospitals have closed down. And the little hospitals were where you went for your little problems. And, truth is, birth is still not an illness. I know that's very hard for people to feel into, but it isn't. And it's a physiologic process that has been medicalized out the wazoo. So along the way, I'm going to share what happened to me to make me the healer, artist, doctoring person, conjure woman in tune with conscious healing that I have become, and has everything to do with what happened along the way in my training. So the first birth to share with you is the first birth I saw in a hospital. Now, here's how it worked. There's a very, very wonderful story, and there's a good story. So the good story is the first birth I saw in a hospital. It was during my third year as a medical student while I was doing a rotation. That's when you spend a month or more kind of trailing around the older doctors hierarchically, medical students being the lowest in the totem pole when I was doing this. And I was in a hospital in a labor and delivery room, and the resident I was trailing along behind was doing an intervention on the woman who was having the baby. What he was doing was putting an internal fetal monitor on the scalp head of the baby. And I'm watching this for the first time. And I'm watching somebody put a tube into all those private places, take a little tiny, tiny thing that had a screwy type needle, shoop, and put it and do the screwy thing through the straw, and then pull the straw out. And then there was a little cord hanging out so that the scalp that had just been connected with through this screwing thing on the baby had a connection to the outside so that they could plug it into a monitor and watch the baby more carefully. Okay, I've never seen anything before, so I'm trying to follow along with this. But right as the male resident, white, did this, the fetal monitor that they were looking at, when they screwed it all back in, it had gone right? And that's down. It had gone down. And the resident got all panicked and said, "Oh, we're gonna have to run down the hall. Time for us. We're gonna have to do a cesarean." And the nurse, I remember, said, wait a minute, just wait a minute." And the heart problem, do 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 do, went back up to where it was supposed to be. So I'm watching this. I'm a student. I'm trying to learn. It's like, well, that looks like it was a response. The baby, you just screwed something into the baby's head and It looked like the baby responded. Didn't we learn about vagal responses where you have some kind of shock in your, and nobody wanted to hear any of those things. So the nurse kind of took me aside and said, I think you do much better down the hall over there. And she sent me out, and I went down and actually saw my first good birth, and that was with a midwife doing the birth for the baby. And what was good about that one, it was the first birth I'd ever seen, and it was pretty standard position in a hospital, meaning the woman, she was positioned where she was sitting up, but her feet were still way up in stirrups. She wasn't lying flat on her back, but she was sitting up. Her husband was by her head, and the midwife was between her legs, ready to catch the baby. What I remember from that is the face of the father. I'll never forget the face of the father. He showed so much love, awe, joy, and amazement in his eyes as he witnessed this woman whom he loved, who had carried this creation that they had made together and was now birthing it for them both to parent. It was a magic moment. It was magic enough that I would have wanted to be an obstetrician gynecologist had I not really understood that is a surgical specialty. They're more interested in the C-sections, at least back when I was there, and the millions of dollars they can make in maybe 5 years, which I also heard, than a long time life of getting babies out of women safely and with minimal harm. That was a pretty political statement, and anybody who's following me knows that I say birth is not an illness. So that was a good birth, but a beautiful birth happened um, during that same time period. Just to cut to the chase, I created for myself an underground rotation, meaning that with a doctor's cover, I'm not going to name any names, I was supposed to be going out to an obstetrician gynecologist's office, and they were going to cover for me as I went out and did home births and did a midwife supported birth center births for a month's rotation. Um, the midwife that I had seen birth the baby with the awestruck father, she was my mentor and teacher for that 1 month while I trailed around behind her. Along the way, the first birth that I saw with her was I'll never forget this, 36-year-old elderly prima gravida, meaning it was the first time she was having a baby. A woman who I had seen coincidentally, in a world of no coincidences, in my neighborhood. So I'd seen a woman who uh, was a patient with the midwife, lived in my neighborhood. This is all in the Capitol Hill area of Washington, D.C. I had seen her at the Y. I had seen her swimming. I had seen her, it turns out, the morning she went into labor. And I was at her home when she was in active labor as a medical student, just coming to watch while the midwife that I was trailing around behind supported her. So what happens? I walk into it was a triple story townhouse in Washington, D.C. And the first thing I noticed was I smelled greens and ham. And what had happened was this was a mixed race couple where the father of the baby was Black and his sister had come up and was doing the cooking in the kitchen. When I say come up, she had come up from some other state to be here for this birth. The white mama was upstairs in a bedroom. I went through the kitchen with all that good smelling ham upstairs, and I walk into a situation where Everybody's just hanging out. There's a woman in a bed. There is a white woman. There is a black man kind of sitting next to her on the bed. The woman that is the midwife is down, uh, kind of off to the side in a chair. It was not a rocking chair, but it was every bit almost as classic as the rocking chair with a midwife sitting in it. So she's sitting and she was knitting. She wasn't rocking, but she was in a chair knitting. So I come into this kind of peaceful scene of not much going on, and I just join people and sit. And maybe 2 minutes, they introduced me. Uh, Maybe a minute or 2 later, the woman lying on the bed says, "Oh, here comes another one." And all of a sudden, that peaceful room shifted, and it shifted into high gear around, "What do you need? How can we support you?" Oh, I forgot there was jazz music playing in the background through all of this. And there was a minute and a half of full focus on her, support for her, and then she rested, and everybody went back to their places. So that kind of wave phenomenon happened back and forth, and, until she was ready to push the baby out, and it was not long, but it was so relaxed, and the intensity came with the energy in the room. And I know my kids say mama's woo-woo, and she uses all these strange words, but there is no word in the English medical lexicon that explains that there are changes that one feels. I call it energy in the room. The energy in the room as this little baby was being born was so beautiful, because what happened was the baby was coming out. And again, this is the first time I'm seeing a baby crown. The head came out, and this baby smiled. It's like the baby smiled before the shoulders were delivered. Then the baby just kind of like was on the bed, and then the mama picked the baby up and put the baby on her chest herself, and the baby started suckling, and that's one of the things that will often help the uterus contract and the placenta go ahead and, be expelled. So that was a beautiful birth where everybody cleared the room. The mama got up and showered. The midwife explained to me there's gonna be this wonderful surge of energy that's gonna be done soon, so catch the wave and get her celebrating and then put her back to bed. So while she was showering, we changed the bed, because this is midwifery. This isn't doctor time where you leave and have somebody down the hall come and take care of it. So we changed the bed and went downstairs, and she came downstairs, and dinner was ready, and a pediatrician came to check the baby at the house. She came with the baby in her arms downstairs. There was a gay couple, 2 men from across the street that were just so overcome with the idea that they'd seen her pregnant that morning. There's a baby in her arms this afternoon, evening. Oh my God. It was it was very, very beautiful. That was good birth, done very well, and it was the first birth I'd seen, so I had, ideally and happily, a very skewed view of birth, uh, relative to hospital birth versus home birth. Thank Goddess for that skewed vision. Birth number 2 in a hospital that is astonishing and not a tall tale at all. Many, many years later, I worked, with Amish women, in the town of Arthur, Illinois, about 45 minutes, or maybe it was miles, 45 something south of Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, where I was doing public health in a community health clinic. So if anybody knows the old TV series Northern Exposure, I had one of those kinds of placements, and I was invited by the Amish people to come down and do a once a week uh, pregnancy clinic, which would save them the money of hiring drivers to come up, And it was also a very sweet, I'm going to say this, cover for the fact that in that community too, there were a lot of home births going on. And I've always, my entire medical career since that amazing beginning, been a very strong advocate for women can do this at home, want to do this at home. Let me help with that. So I was supporting Amish women. A Mennonite midwife was doing their home birth, and she was also very cautious and safe midwife. So when a woman had had many, many children, she suggested that they have the baby at the hospital just because there's a higher possibility of the uterus not contracting and the woman bleeding a lot afterwards. So here was a woman who was being shipped up to me, had this was going to be her, I think, 11th baby. And she was shipped up with a driver. I was going to meet her at the hospital from my clinic. I knew that sometimes things can get a little tricky politically at the desk when you have people coming in, old order Amish in their clothes to try to get them checked into the hospital. So I went straight up to labor and delivery. And at the desk, right as I was coming out of the elevator, I see, perfect timing, a white man in old order Amish clothing with the straw hat and the suspenders peering out into the hallway kind of anxiously. So I didn't even go to the desk. I went straight to the room. And I said, "Hi, I'm Dr. So and so. I hear you're just here to have the baby safely. We're going to get you in and out as quickly as possible. How are things going for you in here?" And I met the mother, and she was quiet and peaceful, and nothing was going on with her either. And I said, "I'm going to check you and just see how far along you are so we can see, how much time you're going to have to stay here." Ordinarily, physiology, we kind of think of a centimeter an hour, and you need to be 10 centimeters dilated from nothing in order to have the baby's head come out easily. So I checked her with an internal exam with my fingers, and she was 8 centimeters dilated. And I said to her with my hand there, um, "You're not quite fully dilated." And this is all going on at once. And as I'm saying those words, she, quiet woman that she was, says, "Oh, another one is coming," right? And and over my fingers, I feel her cervix dilate the final 2 centimeters. A baby's head comes right out, and whoop, the baby came out in the bed. The baby came out in the bed. It's called a non-sterile precipitous delivery. It wasn't clean enough. Everything went too fast. Delivery, the baby just came. All right. So we had the baby in the room. I cut the cord. We called the nurse. And the father was holding the baby when the nurse came in the room. The nurse hadn't even seen me come in, so it was very much shocking for her to have the baby there. The father's holding the baby. I'm the doctor. We're doing fine, but the nurse is unhappy. So the father says, uh, "This one's a good one." And he's holding the baby up and down. "This one's a good one. I think this one's about 7 pounds." Right? And the nurse takes the baby away from him and says, "We have to take it to the nursery to have it weighed." And so they took it to the nursery, they cleaned it up. Mama was fine. There was no bleeding afterwards. She was going to stay uh, one night and go home the next day just to make sure that she didn't have any postpartum hemorrhaging. So when the nurse comes back into the room, like 10 minutes later with the baby, the father says, "And how much does he weigh?" And the nurse hands it back to him and says, 7 pounds, 1 ounce. So sometimes we still have hierarchical craziness, but that was really a beautiful birth. She went home happy to her 11 children, and everybody was good with that. Moving right along, the last one I'm going to share, and again, I want to share the ones where women were doing things that a lot of us looking at current birth practices in 2026 would think are impossible or dangerous or wrong. Um, my favorite kind of birth has always been a non-sterile precipitous delivery where the baby just comes out a little too fast and everybody's good. And as long as the mama hasn't torn, and they usually don't, we're in good shape. So, birth number 3 that I wanna share, I have permission to share some of the details, and I checked them. A friend of mine had a pregnancy with twins and had these twins vaginally. Now, that's not something that even is an option for most people anymore in their doctor OB-GYN relationships. So she gave birth in a hospital to twins vaginally, and they were good size. They were like 6 pounds or better. Um, she had an induction, and I'm not quite sure in the scheme of things if that felt like something that was forced on her, or she wasn't happy to have been induced. Hello, Karen. Nice to see you there. Hello, Eva. We're telling birth stories, and this birth story is about a beautiful woman who gave birth to twins and had vaginal birth for her twins. And the twins are not only doing well, but they were good sized babies, nursed both of the babies with supplementation of formula. So that's another good birth story that I have from my years of experience. One of my most fun ones in retrospect was understanding that I had helped a woman have the kind of birth that she wanted, which was in a hospital because she wanted to be safe. This was in a Boston area hospital. She wanted the safety of a hospital, and she also wanted to do things her way. So her way meant she didn't want to be in a hospital bed. After the baby was born, she wanted to be on the floor with the mattress and with the baby in her arms, and not in a bassinet or a cradle kind of a thing like they make you do in a hospital. I wrote all the orders that made it okay for her to have that experience. Well, coincidentally, in a world of no coincidences, I am in Canada. I am at a international socialist conference. I am in a large auditorium where there are 3 languages being translated through the little bud things that you put in your ears, but they didn't have enough for everybody, so I'm thinking I could do pretty well with Spanish and French, and I'll be okay. And I was. The woman in front of me was typing, and she was clearly fluent in Spanish and was typing in English. So I could kind of look at what she was typing and get a little more of what was being said. Um, Anyway, we walked out together, that woman and I, because I said she was typing in English. She was listening to the Spanish. And when we were talking, she and I, because I didn't know who she was, we started talking in French because I was in Montreal. We talk a minute and she says, it's clear that she's American, US, and we can switch into English. We switch into English, and in less than another minute, it turns out this is my patient from all those many years, and I mean from about 15 years ago, that had slept on the mattress on the floor and was so happy that she had the opportunity to have her baby the way she wanted to have her baby. As I remember, I believe she was a single mom by choice. And I got to see pictures of this child at age 15. So 15-year-old child. I say all of this because attached to this invitation to come and have some good birth stories, the classic video, I found it like 5 minutes before I posted this live. Birth in the squatting position. This is one that just blew my mind the first time I saw it. It's 4 or 5 women, um, most of them indigenous, and one white woman, probably wife of the cultural anthropologist filming all of this, having their babies in a squatting position. And I post it in an age and a time when American hospitals are starting to be crazier than anything I could have ever imagined with respect to your options for your births. Now they're telling you you have to get in a car in labor and drive to maybe a hospital or a spoke that is 2 hours away from where you live because the little hospitals are closing down. Well, there's some other options like freestanding birth centers and having babies in your own home. So I was always very much impressed by the organization Midwives Alliance of North America. I'm going to check and see what they're doing these days. That was my organization of choice. Certified nurse midwives playing nicely with what we used to call lay midwives or apprenticed midwives. Don't know what's going on there politically now. Childbirth Providers of African Descent was the first place I remember seeing the revival of Black midwives. I say revival because there was a whole thing that happened in the 1920s and 30s that's painful and confusing, but also trained a whole bunch of Black women with a certain standard and took some of the old folk remedies and things and kind of slid them in sideways. So I have a couple people who have joined. Does anybody have any questions or concern? Because we're just about to leave. As I said, I'm all dressed in my PJs, ready to go to bed in my Jack Skelton pajamas tonight. I wanted to have you have good stories in your head about how we, people who are assigned female with wombs and are still birthing the babies, we can do this. And if the system has been failing us, we can take care of ourselves, but we have to start now. I am in the anti-fascist lane that says build new cultures and protect the people. 2 out of 4 things that you can do to be helpful in these troubling times that don't involve any marching and protesting and don't involve writing to your congressman, but protect the people. And as I said, last and not, make new culture. In this case, make new culture from old ideas. All right, we are closing down. I will make sure that the Substack AI post this clean and clear with not any editing, and it always puts all those weird words in front. If anybody has any tips for me, I'm going to be checking this out so that I can do it more efficiently. And I'm on my way to Panama, so I'm probably not going to be doing one of these live streams next week. I hope people do well. It's trying, strange times out there right now. We have got to take care of ourselves and each other. Ashe.